We begin today by acknowledging that here in Salt Lake City, we are located on land which is named for the Ute tribe and is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. We recognize and respect the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. Additionally, we are utilizing the technology of Zoom, which is headquartered in San Jose, California, on the traditional lands of the Ohlone peoples. We pay our respects to the current and past elders of all of these lands for their continued stewardship. We also must acknowledge that the prosperity of what we call the United States has depended on the labor of enslaved peoples. Rather than simply speak these words, we encourage all of us to consider donating to organizations like the ACLU, Black Lives Matter, Campaign Zero, and the NAACP. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brooke Horsch. I am a middle-aged white woman with lots of gray or silver hair. I'm wearing a colorful scarf and a gray sweater, and I'm located in my office with a whole bunch of office-y kind of filing cabinets and calendars around me. I'm the executive director of Utah Presents, a multidisciplinary presenter at the University of Utah. And we are thrilled to convene the 7th session in Artists Elevated, discussing equity and creativity in the Mountain West series. Artists Elevated was inspired by the collaborative work of Creating New Futures, a national conversation led by dance artists of color from across the country. As we witnessed those conversations, we realized that we needed to both expand the conversation to address other disciplines and contract the conversation to be more specific to our region, the Mountain West. You can find past sessions in the series, as well as our future session information on the Utah Presents website. And we'd love for all of you to help spread the word so as many folks as possible can access all the sessions for viewing. They are recorded and you can find them all there. I'd like to thank our key partners, the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, the College of Fine Arts at the University of Utah, the Salt Lake City Arts Council, and Utah Humanities, who all helped make this programming happen, particularly by valuing the artists involved and helping us to pay them for their participation, time, and labor. Okay, now for just a few Zoom logistics. Today's session will start with introductions and a conversation led by our moderator. For the last part of the session, we'll share questions with our moderator and panelists. So if you have them, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section at any time. It's different than the chat area, and you should be able to find it on the right-hand side of the lower section of your Zoom screen. If your question is for a specific panelist, please indicate who that is. I'm pleased to now introduce our moderator, Liz Ivkovich. Liz is a key member of the Utah Presents team, but in addition to her work with us, Liz also publishes on dance, the environment, and justice with articles in the Journal of Environmental Studies and Sciences, Local Environment, Love Dance More, and Performance Research. She is also a teacher, a producer, and a performer. So Liz, thanks for moderating with us today, and the time is yours.
Thanks, Brooke. It's so wonderful to be here with you all and to have the opportunity to learn from you and just ask some questions and have an exciting, robust conversation. I'll take a second to describe myself. So I'm in my 30s. I'm a white woman with black hair, and I'm wearing a green, fuzzy, cozy sweater. I'm in a peach colored room in my sister's house in Toledo, Ohio, which is the ancestral homeland of the Ottawa, Seneca, and Erie people, and also a place of trade for a number of Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, Eel River, Lenape, Kaskaskia, Kickapoo, Miami, Muncie, Peoria, Piankasha, Shawnee, Wee, and Wyandot. So I feel really honored to be here at this intersection of so many different histories and peoples and to be having this conversation with you all today. For our first opening kind of warm up, get to know you, I'd like to ask everybody to introduce themselves, share any affiliation that you'd like to share, give us a verbal description, and then could you tell us about a project that you're excited about that you've been working on? So I'm going to hand the baton over to Stephanie. And Stephanie, after you share, would you pass the baton to the next person on your screen? Thanks.
All right, thank you. I knew you were going to call me first. I knew it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Tavares Rand. I am an African-American, I guess, middle-aged woman. I have on a blue button-down shirt. I have braids in my hair that are very long and dramatic, which is what I felt like doing this week. I am in Denver, Colorado right now, and yeah, that's who I am. So what am I excited about? I am super excited that we got the go ahead to do our film festival on Martha's Vineyard and in Denver this August and October. So excited about planning and getting all of that done. Was that all the questions? I want to make sure I didn't forget anything.
Yeah,
It
that's
was.
great.
Okay, good. So I will pass the baton on to Babs.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm Babs Case. I am more than a middle-aged woman. I am white. I have long brown hair with a little gray streak that comes through there. And it's no surprise that I'm dressed in black because I wear black all the time. I'm really excited to be here with all of you and discuss what we do and how we do it. I am an artist first, a dancer, choreographer, and visual artist, but my job is as artistic director of Dancers Workshop, located in Jackson, Wyoming, near the beautiful Teton National Park. And our organization, Dancers Workshop, is entering into its 50th year. We are a dance organization that commissions, presents. We have a dance school, and we also do outreach throughout the state of Wyoming. So that's who I am. And I will pass it to, on my screen, it's you, Liz, but let's see. I will pass it to Aisha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Ahmed Post. I am the Executive Director of the Robert and Judy Newman Center for the Performing Arts at the University of Denver. However, I am coming to you right now from Colorado Springs because I'm moving to Denver in 6 weeks. Haven't quite made the move yet. I'm a Pakistani American woman in my 30s. Hair is all back. It's curly, but can't really see it, but it's kind of messy, and wearing a gray sweater. And the project I'm working on right now that I'm most excited about is we are turning the Newman Center into a vaccine clinic. And so we have been trying to think through using dressing rooms as vaccination spaces and thinking about different ways we can move people through the building and have waiting areas and, all sorts of different pieces of getting a mass vaccination site done. We're really excited to put everybody back to work and use our crowd management skills. So on that note, I will turn it over to Vanessa.
Thank you. I'm Vanessa Castagnoli. I'm the Executive Director at Ogden Contemporary Arts. I'm a 37-year-old white woman with dirty blonde hair that is pulled back and is quite messy. I'm wearing a blue button-up shirt, and my office for Executive Director for an art center is actually really plain and is all white because we are fairly new. Project that I'm most excited about is actually our current project, and I encourage everyone who's in Utah to come see it. It's Lauren Lee McCarthy. She's an artist out of LA, and the project is called The Changing Room. It's an interactive experience where you get to come in and choose one out of 200 different emotions, and through light, sound, and projection, the entire gallery makes you and everyone else feel that emotion. And I think that's, I don't think we have anyone else to pass the baton to.
Thanks, Vanessa and Babs, Aisha, Stephanie. So I want to start us off thinking about our roles as presenters and curators. What does that mean? And how can we kind of begin to unpack that work. So I'm going to do something I'm calling it a lightning round. So what I want to do is let's go in that same order. Stephanie, Babs, Aisha, Vanessa. And can you give us 1 or 2 words on how you see your role as a presenter curator? What does that mean to you? Stephanie?
The word that I would use to describe myself would be an influencer. And I picked that word because we celebrate and showcase the works of independent and established filmmakers of color. And that I feel is it's a huge honor, and I take it very seriously, and I'm really happy to do it. And I will pass the baton to Babs.
Thank you, Stephanie. The word that I would use is relationship, I think, because I feel very strongly about not just bringing artists in for one visit, but for really building a relationship between our organization, the community, and the artists. We also live in such an extraordinary place that for me, sharing who we are and where we are with artists is very important to me. So it's really about love and the relationship, just sharing with artists and with audiences. And I will pass it to Aisha.
Thank you.
Good
I guess the word that comes to mind immediately today is citizen, because I feel like so much of what we're doing right now with the Newman Center really has to do with thinking about our place within the city, and what does it mean to be an arts center within an urban area that is rapidly growing? What does it mean to engage with everybody who lives in that city and beyond? And what is our relationship in that interdisciplinary space to urban planning or civil rights or, environmental causes, all those different things. So there's a lot of different connections, and I love that a performing arts center can be the nexus for so many of those things. Vanessa?
Yeah, for my 1 word, I would say I want to support local artists, local creatives, on top of supporting artists on a national level as well. We're big advocates for paying artists, and we're not going to ask anyone to do anything for free. And we also want artists to come in and feel empowered and supported to show their creativity. We're pulling them into our space for a reason, and we want to give them the platform to show it to our community.
Thanks, everyone. I mean, the words I heard, such powerful words: influencer, relationship, citizen, support. And then I also heard this idea of the nexus of all these different things coming together and people being empowered through our work and being offered a platform. When it comes to thinking about who those people are that you give a platform to, how do you make that decision? What are some of the factors that go into your thinking? And walk us through that process. And I'll just open it up to whoever's ready to unmute themselves and jump in first.
I'm happy to jump in. As far as selecting artists, we're looking for professional artists that are going to show on a very high level. So that's pretty important to us. But at the same time, we're also looking for an artist that's going to come in and engage with our community. We don't want someone to show up and install a show and leave and not even be present for the opening. We want them to offer art talks for our community. We want them to work with our local creatives, photographers, videographers, copywriters, designers, because our community in Ogden there's a lot of talented people here, and we want to make sure that we're building those networks and showing the outside world what Ogden has to offer.
I would say that for us, we're very much looking for voices that I feel need to be heard right now in response to our just current world. and engaging, definitely, as Vanessa said, people that are interested in engaging with the community, with students, and really interested in sharing who they are and how they became very, inspired to create the art that they're creating. And of course, a level of excellence, which is somewhat, that's different for everyone. But I think in dance right now, there's definitely contemporary voices that are really speaking to what's happening in our world right now.
I would say from a film perspective that we are looking for filmmakers that want to tell a story, and they're doing it in a way that is engaging, insightful, and important, right? Not every story has to be about trauma or anything like that. We're just looking for creativity. Our process is really stringent. And we do take consideration to first-time filmmakers because everybody needs their first shot or their first break. But for us, it really is about the script. It's telling a story, beginning, middle, end. It's about the subject matter. Like, so, for 2021, which is amazing, you can imagine we're getting like 1 million films on COVID. So it's sort of like, I don't want any more COVID films, right? So when you get something like that, you have to figure out which one is the best. And when I say best, I mean best for your audience that they're going to relate to. So what we look for is just, script. We look for acting, we look for production, cinematography, and really being able to tell a story from beginning, middle, and end. And I'll add that one of the things that I'm most proud of with our festival, both, even though the one in Denver is going to be 3 years old and Martha's Vineyard is 19 years old, is that it's morphing into more of a multicultural activation, which I'm super proud of. So what that means is we're getting a lot of films from Asian filmmakers. We're getting a lot of films from white filmmakers, Latino filmmakers, the LGBTQ. So I love that, right? But at the core, it is an African and African-American film festival. And the multicultural films that we're getting, either the cast is all Black or their producer or director is Black. And it's nice. I like how that's happening organically. And, I love that we can give voice to people who need to be seen and heard.
There was something that Stephanie just said about thinking about your audience, and what the relationship is between the artist that you're putting on stage and the audience that you have, right? And so I think, I feel like I'm in a sort of interesting place right now with the Newman Center, where we're coming up on our 20th anniversary, and it's been a very traditional performing arts center, whatever that sort of connotes for you, and I'm trying to think about how to expand the types of artists and the diversity and inclusivity of the artists that we present. And we have a core audience that is used to a very different type of artistry, right? And so what is that? How can I do right by both the audience, by not pushing them so hard that maybe they fall off, right? And we don't get to engage with them anymore. But then also, how can I better serve the artists of today and think about, what they need, right? Maybe it's a space residency, so they can just have room to build a work or have access to our technical team or whatever it is. And that allows us to engage with artists that might not have that commercial success that we need in a 1,000-seat theater, but at the same time allows us to be of service to the artists in our industry who need that push to get to the top. So I'm rethinking how I approach artists and curation. Right now, I will tell you that our upcoming season is all rebookings from COVID. So there wasn't a ton of creativity in that piece because, of course, we have to oblige. We have those obligations, right? So it'll be an interesting couple of years to see how the Newman Center changes and what that symbiosis between artist and audience becomes.
I love that you're bringing up this piece about audience, and also in that I think is implicit this idea that we each have our standpoint of how we perceive who our audience is and what their needs and ideas and things, you know, where they are on that spectrum of being willing to be pushed and wanting to be comfortable in the seats as they're viewing something. And Babs, you had used the words excellence. You talked a little bit about excellence, and we have a question from one of our attendees, which I want to pose to the group. I'm curious about the use of the words professional and excellence, and would like to know more about how these subjective qualifiers are evaluated by our panelists or their organizations.
It is a very interesting question, because I find that for me, an artist has a consistency, is maybe more than excellence, but a consistency to be vulnerable, be willing to share of themselves and their process, and openly and willingly share that with all ages. I've had experiences. We do a lot of open rehearsals when a company is in residence, and I've had experiences where audience members ask a question, and if it's, I mean, and the way that artists can answer that and really be revealing in some sense of their process is interesting to me. So when I say the word excellence, I guess I not only mean that their work is very, for me, intriguing, you know, it involves mind and heart, and but it's also how they interact with audience members and people that are in the open rehearsal and students in the classroom. Yes.
I'd love to, Babs, I'm sorry. I'd love to chime in on that as well, because I did say professional, and excellence is actually one of our core values. We're looking to bring in globally and nationally recognized artists into our art gallery, into our art center, for the sake of, you know, providing our community an opportunity to see work that's seen in Chicago and New York. And along with these contemporary artists, most contemporary artists actually have day jobs. A lot of them are professors. So they come in and they're prepared to give art talks and to get involved with our local university, Weber State. And I just think that's a very important trait to have when you're pulling in an artist. Contemporary art can be kind of intimidating when you walk into a gallery and you look at a banana taped to the wall. Like, why is that art? We want to help bridge those that maybe might not visit a contemporary art gallery, and provide programming that's educational to help expand our audience.
I think from a film perspective, when we, I don't know if I use the word excellence, but you know, we do look for the best of the best. And for us, that means, you know, here's a story. This is the perfect example. So one year we received a submission on how to cook tilapia in butter. Okay, you can imagine that film did not get accepted, right? That's not excellence. And I'm not saying it's a bad film. What I am saying is that my audience has come to respect the kind of films that we show in regards to storytelling, right? So it's either relationships, it's horror films, it's comedy, it's whatever you want, whatever it is. And that type of film is not something that is a fit for our audience. So a lot of our filmmakers have gone on to do amazing things, like Matthew Cherry, who just won an Oscar last year. You know, Ava DuVernay's had a film at our festival, Morocco Omar, like so many actors have come through our doors and have, you know, showcased their independent films and have gone on to do amazing things. Also, since our festival is not we're not a nonprofit, I have a responsibility to my sponsors to make sure that I am showing quality content so that they feel that, showing, Just Mercy to our audience and bringing Michael B. Jordan to the Vineyard and to Denver, we brought Brian Stevenson, is something that's going to fit, right? So we have to make sure that the caliber of films that we are showing, short speeches and documentaries, are at a certain standard. It's hard because I judge with heart. And my husband is a filmmaker, so he's more technical. So I'm always like, oh my God, Babs, I love that film. It was so cool. And Fliz is like, no, it never ended. Like it just kept going on and on and on. And then they cut the film. And then it was like, well, how did this film end? So, for me, it's tough to tell people no, but your audience demands the best. And that's what we have to do.
Yeah, and I think that question of the best, right? I mean, it also just comes from years and years and years of seeing things and engaging with things and building that aesthetic, right? I mean, I think it's sort of hard sometimes for me to explain why one dance company, really captures something, or why I think that'd be really successful versus another one that seems, on paper like they'd be identical in some ways, right? They went to the same dance school or whatever, and but there is just that certain thing that I think can really drive a performance over the edge. It's that ability to connect with your audience right from the stage, and it's a clarity of that vision of what it is that you're trying to do with the work. And yeah, it takes a lot of seeing a lot of really good stuff and a lot of not so good stuff, and seeing things in process and seeing like how things evolve and your own taste evolves, and so it is it is subjective. I mean, that's kind of part of the game, right? But subjective with different opportunities and initiatives in mind, right? Sometimes I want it to just be like really commercial and help us to pay for the really weird, funky, like new thing that I'm really excited about, but isn't going to sell a whole lot of tickets, right? But I still think it's really awesome. I want to support it. So it's always sort of this balancing game. But when it comes to the professionalism, that feels much clearer to me, especially when it comes to community engagement and education. It is so clear who has really sat down and taken the time with their organization to think through how they wish to engage with the communities they go to. Maybe they have lesson plans for different age levels. If they know, hey, like we just don't do well with kindergartners, but we'd love to talk to high schoolers, and they have a plan and they can talk to you and your education director about what that game plan is going to be. Unfortunately, because there are so many presenters who are looking for that piece, everyone will tell you, oh yeah, we do education. Yeah. But that's not actually true. And so holding those educational, those enrichment activities to a much higher level, I think is really important. And that's where a huge part of that professionalism comes in for me.
Thanks, everyone. I have a couple other ways that I think we could go. I feel like one of the things that is coming up a little bit on the periphery, and I want to bring into the center of our conversation, are these questions that this entire Artist Elevated series is looking at, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Mountain West. So I'd love to hear from you all. How do you define, or can you articulate, what does diversity, equity, inclusion mean to you in your practice? And give us like a sentence or two about that. Whoever's ready to jump in, would be great.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Oh, Stephanie, do you want to go? Okay. I mean, so my framework has always been to sort of look at, through the selection of a particular work or artist, who am I explicitly including or excluding, and who am I implicitly excluding or including, right? And that's a really helpful, I mean, even just to kind of create that as a series of squares, right? Just a 2x2 square, and just sort of think about how that's mapping out your audience has been a really useful framework for me. I think in the Mountain West, it's really important to hold on to the geographic and the human geography of our place and space, because the way that we talk about DEI in this region, I think should feel really different from how it's approached in California or on the coast. But a lot of times we let those folks sort of lead that conversation. And I think we need to be really specific about who we are and how our very rich, engagement of humans and space and geography have like really defined who we are as a region. And I think too often we lose sight of that. And I would love to see a more regionally specific approach to those conversations.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Isha. I think that you hit it on the head. For me, DEI is about inclusion and being open to different ideas, right? So for us, it's nice, like I said earlier, that our festival has morphed into more of this multicultural activation. It would be wrong for me. And it's funny because sometimes we'll get emails, and sometimes all the time, we'll get emails from filmmakers who'll say, hi, I'm Asian, or I'm white, or I'm Middle Eastern. Can I submit to your film festival? And it's like, yes, like I would be kind of racist if I said no, right? But here's the criteria that you have to fit into to be considered for what we're doing. And I find it interesting that they asked the question, that they asked this question. So for me, I'm really happy that it's morphing into more of this multicultural thing. And then for Denver specifically, because there is a lack of multicultural representation in the city of Denver, I can only speak to Denver, I think it's really important to change that lens, because I think subconsciously people who are not of color have their biases in regards to what they think. And I'll just speak to myself because I'm Black, what a Black person is experiences. And I am fortunate that I'm able to bring different aspects of Black life to this city, right? So not all of us grew up in a housing, like it's not that typical, what do we call it, struggle porn, right? Not all of us went through struggle porn. And I'm not saying that that's not an important story, but somehow people of color get lumped into that one story. And that's not fair, because that's not everyone's story. It wasn't my story growing up specifically. So I'm happy that I am able to bring projects to the city that show the depth of who we are as Black people. And what I find interesting is that being from New York, when I do these activations in New York, my audience is like 95% Black or Hispanic. When I do these activations in Denver, my audience is 80% white. And I'm super happy about that, because I feel that they are the ones that need to see these films. And they come with questions, they come with open mind and open eyes and curiosity. And I think it's super important. And the more that we do these kind of activations and conversations, I think it helps to change perceptions of their, unhidden biases towards people of color, or their hidden biases towards people of color.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in here. For us, or I guess for myself, it's more about providing unbiased opportunities. I can go back to the professional and excellence that we try to program into our space. And I'm really just looking at the art. And I mean, I don't know if I don't have all the answers, I know that, but when it comes to how I program, it's about looking at our community, our audience, and just trying to be as unbiased as possible.
I would say that for me, again, it goes back to that place of artists who have a voice that needs to be heard. I think about Bill T. Jones, and we did a 3-year project with Bill. And I could just see myself saying, I mean, he was a hero to me as a modern dancer growing up. And he's almost, 68 years old now. He's health compromised to some degree. And I just feel like I wanted to support his work so that his voice could be heard to our community. In the first year that he came, no one in our community knew who he was. And it was actually 4 years that he came. At the end, it was like he had this huge community that was just very knowledgeable of his work and him and his opinions, and he worked through all the schools, and I find that I mean, we present dance companies from all over the world, and we're so isolated here, and so it's almost like anyone coming in from the outside world is welcome we're in our little town. It's just so isolated.
As gatekeepers of platforms, do you feel that you have biases that come into your approach, and how do you work with those? How do you try to balance out your own standpoint and perspectives?
That's a really good question. It's something we actually bring up when we're recruiting board members for our organization, is like, how are you going to feel when someone on the board, or we're working with an artist, may not necessarily have, the same opinion as you? Like, how do you respond? How are you going to react? And I think it's about respectful dialogue, and being able to have those hard conversations.
That's a really good question. I never actually thought of it. Thank you for asking that. I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking, I guess mine would be when we get films, not now, like when it first started happening, like maybe 5 years ago, when we started getting films from white filmmakers. I think maybe I felt a little like, damn, we can't have nothing with y'all coming up in here. Maybe I felt a little bit like that, but their films were really, really good. And it would be a shame to deny an audience a chance to see this person's work, right? It's not their fault, or whatever color they are. They did a great film. So maybe that was a bias of mine that I quickly got over. But yeah, I think that's what it would be. That's a great question. I never thought of it, but I think I did have those feelings in the beginning.
Yeah, one of the things that's really tough is that a lot of times it's hard to see your own bias, right? And so I know that I'm making biased judgments on the art or the work or whatever I'm doing, but it's hard to see all the ways that you are. One thing I've been toying with doing at the Newman Center is building in a guest curation process, right? And having, somebody in residence, or change it every year or something like that, and have somebody come in and do what they think an art center should be doing. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do that. I haven't really thought through all the pieces, but that's something that I've been definitely thinking about, because I think it would really expand my own curation, because I certainly know that I have a lot of blind spots. I grew up in classical music. I spent 20 years in a practice room. Like, I missed a lot of life while I was doing that. And so, as much for me as for my audience. It'd be nice to hear what other people have seen and what they think is good.
And I'll add that filmmaker, I can't think of his name right now, that we accepted, he won the HBO short film prize. So there you go.
Babs, did you want to speak? If not, that's okay. I just wanted to be sure you had an opportunity.
Well, I feel like I try very hard to leave my, I try very hard to, it's very interesting to me what Vanessa was just saying, because with our board members and things like that, we are so much of like mind. But I do recall an instance where I ran home to take a shower right before an open rehearsal, and I got a phone call from the artist, and the artist said, "Oh, by the way, the dancers are nude." And I was like, "By the way?" And so I was like, "Okay, well, it's fine with me. Let's deal with it. I'll deal with it when I get there." So I just came out, And I said to the audience, I just learned that there's nudity, and I want to know if anyone would be offended. And I'd like to open it up to all of you to have a conversation about it. And it was a really wonderful experience. We discussed it, and there were 4 people who left, but I turned it to them because it was just an interesting experience. I also had another experience where there were audience members who left because of language, difficult language that was being used. And then I got a lot of repercussions about that, but then I continued to send reviews to that person. It was a group of a family group, on why the language was being used. And it actually ended up being a really good cultivation experience.
So that's really interesting. I was watching the artist series that you guys did. You had a group of artists, and some of the conversation was going, well, like when I show at a gallery, I show them my less controversial work, and that made me really sad. I want to see the controversial work. I want to see what the artist is really saying, because that's what makes them who they are, right? That's why we're approaching this artist, is to see, to actually experience their work instead of the censored work. And I feel very fortunate that I have a very supportive board that understands that, and we're a private nonprofit, so we don't have to answer to a government or a university. So we're pretty open to not censoring. If there's nudity, as long as it's for a reason. Yeah, so sorry, I just wanted to add that, because that's something that hit home with me I think it was a couple panels ago.
I think that's an amazing segue into a topic that's really salient for the work that you all do, and also is going to be addressed more next month when we bring funders and critics into the red table, or I'm trying to think of what that web series is. Anyway, but I wanted to ask you all, what are some of the conversations that you have with funders as you're bringing controversial work, as you alluded to, and what are some of the important topics or questions that you think funders should be thinking about as we look forward to the future of the arts?
I'm happy to chat about this a little bit. So one of our goals is to have a very diverse funding source, so we don't allow one funder to be like, well, I don't believe in that. That's not what I'm about. I'm not going to support that, and then we're lost. And then all of our funding is cut off. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I think it's really important to look at where our funding is coming from and be upfront when we are proposing or writing grants or looking for sponsors, because we do corporate sponsorships as well. I just think we need to be really upfront of what we're offering and what our mission and vision is, and let people know that they may not agree with everything that we do or that the artist brings to the table.
Vanessa, are you saying kind of be upfront with the fact that this may be challenging?
Yes, sorry. I didn't verbalize that as well as I could have. Yes, be completely upfront about what we're offering to our community and showing in our art center.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts to add to that?
Well, I think sometimes it's hard because it's hard to be completely upfront, because a lot of times either sponsors, I find that sponsors are either just it's like we have a track record, right? We are who we are and they trust us. And I would say that we have done an amazing job of building a very contemporary, modern audience in a small community. And I completely agree with Vanessa that donor-driven programming is a very bad idea. I mean, you just can't, you have to get their buy-in and their understanding of what your overall mission is with programming. Yeah, it's a tightrope for sure. I mean, there are people who want to support certain artists and don't want to support other artists, and that's okay. I guess it's, that's the way it is.
Well, and there's something about that too, that really resonates from my experience, both at a public and then now a private university, where, the advancement team for the university writ large is dealing with a much wider donor population than I am within the Newman Center, right? And so there's this interesting sort of cross directive, right? On the one hand, they want to, keep the older, really supportive donors that may be more conservative perhaps than our Performing Arts Center, right? And they want to, obviously there's millions and millions of dollars at stake there, right? And that's for the financial future of the university. And there are things that we do at the Arts Center that might be considered offensive or at least uncomfortable for some of those folks. And so it's a really interesting line, where you have to figure out how you're going to deal with that, because they are both realities. And especially this year with COVID, being able to toe that line meant the difference between me having to lay off my staff versus actually being able to pay them health insurance still in the middle of a pandemic. And so, on the one hand, you have to keep that in mind, but then you also have to really live your values. And it feels like this really delicate balance sometimes.
We have a great question here. Stephanie, did you want to say anything? What did you want to add on to that? Want to be sure that there's room for you to speak.
Oh, thank you. No, my situation is just a little bit different. We're not, we don't really have donors. It's not a nonprofit. I think in the beginning, in the early days on the Vineyard, it was more so, we got the question, why Martha's Vineyard? Where is that? Or how many people are going to come, right? So now that we have a track record and there's trust, no one, I mean, it's entertainment, right? So no one's really asking us the type of films and all that stuff that we're showing. So our situation is just a little bit different. It's just more so, is this the kind of environment that we want to bring our A-list actor to, is pretty much what we used to get. And now that trust is there, everything just sort of happens automatically.
Question from an attendee, which really is great because it takes us deeper into the next topic about being specifically in the Intermountain West. They ask, in terms of funding, how does being an organization that exists in the Mountain West, a less populous region than other parts of the country, affect diversifying fundraising or simply fundraising at all? I'll post this for the panelists in the chat.
For our company, it's actually been quite beneficial because I think timing is everything, right? And I think we, moved to Denver at a time where the city realized that they had a lack of multicultural activations or performances or whatever here. And they were super happy that we were here. And a lot of people who held the purse strings came to Martha's Vineyard. So we already had that trust and like, oh, wow, you're doing this here. So for us, fundraising has been pretty good because we fit that diversity bucket, you know, now that Black Lives Matter. We fit that. I'm being mean, I'm sorry.
You know, I moved to Colorado from New York, and it was interesting because on the one hand, yes, there's a ton of money, right, in New York, and at the same time, when you look at the board of trustees across those major institutions in Manhattan, there's a lot of overlap. So there's a lot of money, but it's actually not as huge of a philanthropic base, right, as you might expect, given how much money is sort of floating around, and how many people are there. I'm the rugged individualism thing, that is, you know, sort of part of the Mountain West, means that I have sort of experienced, you know, difficulties with giving, and fundraising. It's not, I mean, certainly there's a lot more that can be done, and it's not that it's not possible. I mean, there's plenty of people who do it well, but it's a very different culture. You know, I find that sort of that old money, new money sort of divide on the East Coast really lends itself, right? That old money culture and tradition of giving to arts, because that's what you were told to do. That's what your family did, right? Your family's been doing it for generations and generations. And here I haven't found that to be as true. And I don't know what that is. And I should also mention that I grew up in Arizona. So it's not like, you know, the Mountain West is new to me, or the Southwest, but it's an observation, and I'm excited to think about it a little bit deeper and find ways to combat that.
It's definitely not easy. I'm still learning. I've only been an executive director for just over a year now, and then a pandemic hit 2 weeks after I was hired, and so fundraising brought a whole new challenge. So we're still figuring it out, but I think looking at that global and nationally recognized level talent and artists could only help us with our fundraising. At least that's the approach I'm taking, and we're trying to look outside of just the Mountain West.
I would say that for us, and for me, again, it's that word relationship. I find that fundraising, I mean, I've been a fundraiser for 40 years now, and I find that it's a very personal thing, for me and my artists and my audience members. It's bringing all of that together that really builds the fundraising kind of, you know, ground. And then I would say that also the other advantage, and I find that coming from New York also, that there's an advantage, of course, here in Jackson Hole. It's a very close-knit community, and so you have very close access to people. And also there's like a really devoted sense of community here. I mean, we have a town that's 12,000 people year round, and we built a $37 million arts center. So it's people are very committed to the community. And so that those two words, relationship and community, are a big part of our fundraising.
I'm kind of struck by how there's a tension, I think, in what each of you all have shared about what you do in terms of, you know, building connections within a community, being dedicated to a local space, but then also working a lot with artists from outside of that sphere and bringing those artists in. And Aisha, you said earlier that you were thinking about how can we create a regionally specific approach to equity, diversity, and inclusion in the arts. I wonder, you know, what do you feel like are the important things about this region that are challenges or things that you need to consider as you're working to support the local community, as you're working to bring in artists from outside? What's unique about this area specifically that might be different than you trying to do your work in New Jersey or in LA or in San Jose?
I mean, I think starting with the fact that, you know, while there's this very interesting, when you think about the history of this region, that it was both once Mexico, that it was both, you know, indigenous, I mean, maybe not as far north as Babs, but you know, that there is that real feeling, and you can tell which parts of this country were part of Mexico once, the indigenous and the variety of indigenous groups that have called this area their home. And then of course, the colonization of all of that, right, all kind of comes together, plus the history of the railroad, right, and how that brought in Asian Americans, right? And so that, all of that really happened sort of around the same time between the 1860s and, you know, 19 teens or so, right? And so that 50-year period, I feel like has huge ramifications for a lot of the Mountain West. And, you know, I think that that history is right on the surface, if not just slightly below. And it's a very different conversation, I think, than what you know, because when you think about that, there's all these different groups coming from various continents and all sort of mingling and fighting and frankly slaughtering each other, right, and buying land from each other. And so I just don't think that we have a very good way of communicating about that history. That history tends to get lost when we talk about our national history. Right, we like the number of people who know what the Gadsden Purchase is, right, is shockingly small, and so that just feels like a really important part for us to think about, and how that changes, you know, who is here, right? And I mean, growing up in Tucson, you know, over 50% of the people there speak Spanish, right? And yet, how many things were bilingual? Very few. It's getting better, you know, but that it was like half everybody was, you know, Mexican in particular. I mean, now it's more Central American and Latin America. But, you know, we just didn't pay a whole lot of mind to that. By we, I mean, major cultural art institutions, right? So I guess that's what I mean by that sort of specificity, right? And thinking about how those stories have been sort of ignored or lost, or and amplifying those voices, amplifying the history of 5 Points, and that the role of 5 Points in, you know, the history of Black Americans, right? I mean, there's just all sorts of things that are very unique about, because the geography is so vast. You know, you get these points of culture that are, you know, really significant because it's the only thing happening for 200 miles around. I don't know. There's a lot more I could say about that, but I'm sort of rambling. So.
I love that, and thank you for talking about this intersection between people and place, because I do think there's a way that the West is often cast in popular imagination as this empty landscape for people to do adventures on, specifically white people to come and do adventures on. So I really appreciate you bringing up some of those stories. Other panelists? Okay, I want to take a turn a little bit back to some of the lessons that we learned from the Creating New Futures folks as they were doing their organizing work. And we're so indebted to all of that for helping to set a course for the future of performing arts. But one of the things that they talked a lot about, and I think has been really coming up, is there's been a reckoning in the arts this year, has been this tension between the institution and the individual, and the feeling that individuals are often not benefiting. And in the arts, that looks like, you know, presenting and curating organizations are benefiting and still thriving, even if they're struggling a little bit, but then artists are really like dealing with the impacts of cancellations and of COVID-19. So I wonder, as somebody who is a gatekeeper, do you feel a responsibility to change your institution? What does that look like for you? What accountability do you feel like you have?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely feel accountable. We need to pay our creatives, our local creatives. I feel like there's this idea that because you're an artist, that your work is your passion and you'll get paid with exposure. You know, come to our gallery and show your work, and we're gonna market it, and you're gonna see all these eyes on your work, and you're basically getting paid by exposure. I want to stop that. I want to pay artists with actual dollars. Not only the artists that are coming to show, but we are paying local videographers and photographers and copywriters. So we're kind of creating this nice little network of creatives that, you know, freelancers that may not have work right now or may be struggling, and we're providing a, you know, an income, small income. We are a nonprofit, but I'm pretty stubborn about not letting artists do anything for free with our organization.
We have an interesting situation where we actually pay rent in our building, so that we occupy, and the institution that manages that building is just basically the landlord. And there's always a lot of tension there for that reason, because of course, the higher the rent gets, the less we can spend on programming, right? And I agree with Vanessa. I feel very strongly about paying artists and creating ways for them to be able to live in Jackson, which is really challenging. So we have sort of a system where, like, dancers in our professional company might also help with development and learn that skill, or we spend a lot of money. We have quite a bit of money in our budget for staff development. So we might train them in Pilates or train them in gyro or some other means for them to also support themselves. But I will say that when COVID hit, we developed a program called Art is Vital, and any artist of any discipline could literally write us a letter and we would support them. So we supported artists of all disciplines, not just dance, in that moment, because there was a lot of obviously programming money that we had allocated that we wouldn't be spending.
When COVID hit, it was definitely a turning point, and it was definitely something that, you know, the analogy I give is, you know, everybody's driving down the highway at their own speed, and then all of a sudden, you know, there's this big crater in the middle of the road, and everybody's got to slam the brakes on and turn the car around in the dark, right? And we have to kind of figure it out. That's just how I feel 2020 was. And, you know, from an artist's perspective, from a film festival perspective, you know, we made the decision not to do it on island, and, you know, the island lost a huge chunk of money. We totally realized that. And from a filmmaker perspective, you know, we were fortunate in the fact that Facebook reached out to us, and we partnered with them and did our festival with the filmmakers on our Facebook page. So that gave them even a greater audience that they would have at any movie theater. And then, you know, one of the things that I pushed with Facebook was that, you know, filmmakers need to be creative, like creatives need to create. So we did a contest, and this is around voting and why civic engagement is important. So we gave filmmakers an opportunity to submit shorts, and Facebook funded the production of this and gave them a prize. and profiled them on Facebook's Facebook, right? So that was, you know, our way of sort of giving back. But I think it's really important to pay people, and we we pay our staff, you know, that comes to the vineyard. Of course, that didn't happen in 2020. And then here in Denver, we partnered with the Cleo Parker Dance Studio and gave the proceeds of what we did from a festival standpoint to them. We didn't take any of the money because we just felt that it was important because, you know, Cleo Parker, there was no dance, you know, there was no more dance classes, no more performances. And, you know, dancers were hit really, really hard with COVID, and actors, and it really broke my heart. So whatever little bit that we could do, we definitely did. And I think it really taught all of us who are, you know, owners or EDs in organizations that even though we will get back to normal and we will have in-person performances, that virtual component is also really important. And it is another avenue and another stream of income for your organizations and also for artists as well. So I think both mediums should stay together.
Yeah, I agree. We actually had a lot of success early on with some virtual programming that we did starting in, I want to say it was June. We did a program called Social Distancing and Art. It was a 3-part series, but it also allowed us to reach a broader audience. We had huge numbers in New York and California and people that wouldn't have seen our organization otherwise.
I want to encourage anybody who's attending to go ahead and post questions for the panelists in the Q&A box, and as I see those, I'll incorporate them. And I did get one directly to me that I love, that kind of goes to this question of the cost of living right now. Thinking about the repeated comments around the cost of living in Jackson and how those increasing costs are also affecting Denver and Salt Lake. What other things are changing for you and your orgs as the Mountain West grows?
So Salt Lake cost of living is getting pretty ridiculous. We're in Ogden, and you see, so we just created, the city just created an art district a few years ago, and we're right in the heart of it. And it's been proven that art districts, and they don't fail. If anything, they're so successful that they end up pricing out the people who started the art district. So I feel like it's our responsibility to learn from others, from the mistakes of the past, and continue to support our local creatives so they can afford to stay in our city, in our art district. We do welcome people in Salt Lake that are watching to come on up to Ogden. Cost of living is definitely cheaper up here.
You know, I have to say, I'm one of those people moving to the city, right? I'm part of the problem. So I think that's something that I'm cognizant of, right? You know, and I'm experiencing this firsthand. I mean, the rent I'm going to end up paying in Denver is going to be more than I ever spend in Brooklyn, which is crazy. But I mean, that's just sort of where it is at this point. So I think there's going to be, you know, to the point that I was saying earlier, you know, the Art Center as citizen, right? There's a lot of conversations about, you know, access, and does being at that physical space, is that important, right? I mean, everybody driving their cars, right? Are we able to work with the university or with the city to build better transportation options, right? Is there a way that we can, you know, get a shuttle going to and from the light rail station, which is on the other side of campus? Technically goes to DU, but it's still a 20-minute walk, right? So there's a lot of conversations I think we have to have around transportation and access. You know, I had sort of thought that virtual offerings would be a huge part of our future, but the recent audience outlook monitor was showing that 90% of people are saying virtual performances will have small to no part of their cultural engagement after the pandemic. So now I'm trying to figure out what that means for us. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the sustainability of, you know, gathering 1,000 people in one room. So.
I mean, I don't know if people have seen or read the book, The Millionaires or Billionaires Wilderness, or about Jackson Hole, but it's a huge problem for us, housing. And it's not just even being able to keep our creatives in our community. It's really about keeping our community in our community. It's like our community is just being like just pressed out. And it's a real problem for us, and our county and city commissioners are really, they're trying to deal with it. One thing that I think for us, as I saw with the pandemic, one thing that allowed us to stay healthy and paying each other is our diversity amongst ourselves, the way that we are not just dancers, or we are not just this or that, but our dancers are Pilates teachers, gyrotonics teachers, craniosacral workers. They work in the office. So we all are sort of we're like a team of people who work together in all different ways. That's one thing. Another thing is that we were reaching out, like we reached out to David Dorfman Dance, because we knew that for him, everything was canceled. The dancers were out of work. So it was like, okay, how can we use this time creatively? So we do a lot of outreach throughout the state of Wyoming. And one thing that we did was we installed a virtual classroom space where we can still reach schools throughout Wyoming with outreach work. And we welcomed all of David's teachers and dancers to come in and learn our outreach work as teachers, so that they could then go back to their own communities throughout the country and teach. So I think diversifying is a way of survival here, at least in our community.
I think this has been implicit in some of the answers that you all have given so far. But it seems like we've really been called on as a sector this year to rethink how we sustain and support each other. And the word I would use for that is care. If you resonate with that word, what role do you see care playing in your programming?
I mean, one way that I've been thinking about that is with staff sustainability, and thinking about how to create a better work-life balance that doesn't involve 80-hour work weeks during our busy season, right? So I think that's something that I'm excited to do, think about flexible work from home, think about when and how we have our meetings, all those sorts of things. So keep taking care of my staff, especially those who experienced 6 or even 9-month furloughs, is really important, because those folks have sacrificed a lot and they've been through a lot this year. So how can we do even better to make sure that they feel like it's an equitable place to show up to work every morning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I echo what you're saying as well. I think from a staffing standpoint, just reducing the hours that we ask them to work, and reducing the number of films we're going to show, right? So instead of showing 80 films, my husband and I were just talking about that today, like for Denver, it's like, so maybe we shorten this and, end at 6 o'clock as opposed to 8 o'clock, because, like, to your point, people have been furloughed. It's a lot to ask of someone to work from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Right. So, yeah, that's what care means to me. And also just really working with more vendors that are based here in Denver and not really hiring outside agencies to do the work, just sort of working with people that are already here in various capacities. That's care for me.
I'm fine. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think partnering with, you know, other local nonprofits has been pretty big for us. If there's somewhere we can help, like offer up a venue for a fundraiser, we're first to raise our hands. I'm the only staff member, so my hours are pretty crazy. We're again a very small nonprofit, and we're really just getting going. So, but yeah, just making sure that our communities, our local nonprofits are okay, and if there's something we can do to help, we will do it.
No wonder we started talking at the same time. I was going to say partnering too, Vanessa, because it's a big part of what we do. Like we're putting, we're collaborating with the Grand Teton Music Festival to put up this large tent. Then we're going to keep it up for 4 weeks to do programming outside. And we've also opened it to any arts organization in the community to utilize that space, reaching out to other dancers in our, you know, individual dancers saying, you need a space to come work, come be with us. I mean, just trying to partner and be there for other people.
I love that. I love these various responses and approaches to that thought. And I didn't share this question with you all beforehand, but I'm thinking for myself, as I'm thinking about care and my own sustainability as a staff member, how much I miss having fun with my coworkers, you know, because I do think there's a part of what we do that's, you know, I know we all take it so seriously, but we have fun doing it, right? Like it's fun to go to a show, it's fun to see a film. So how are you keeping fun alive for yourself? And you can talk about that professionally or personally, any way you want to, but how are you having fun right now with no live performance?
We've been pretty fortunate in Ogden to where we've actually been able to hold a few events and just do it, you know, safely. So limit the amount of people that can come in, masks obviously required, everyone has to keep their distance. So we've been having these very, very small, maybe not even 15 people happy hours for our members. So the people that are supporting us, especially now, just inviting them to come in, talk about art, be around like-minded people. It's just nice to be able to start that social interaction again on a small level.
Yeah, for me, fun personally is binge watching The Office because I love that show. That's fun for me. And professionally, you know, holding these color of conversation, virtual conversations about different topics that affect women and people of color with thought leaders in the Denver area has been really fulfilling and, you know, gives us something to do and to look forward to. But number one is Michael Scott and Dwight from The Office.
For me, it's Jesus and Marrow. I've been watching a lot of Jesus and Marrow on Showtime, which is my like secret favorite thing to do. Yeah, and honestly, you know, my husband and I have been doing a pretty decent job of trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. So like we have happy hour, right? And like I bought little bar snacks and like we'll go sit outside with the dogs and like you know, pretend like everything's normal. And build ourselves nice cocktails. So that's been a nice way to pass the time. But I got to tell you, it's getting a little long. Like at this point, 13 months has been really aggressive. Like I can't wait to go back and just do things. So.
True that. True that. Babs, what about you?
I can't really say. No, I'm kidding. Well, all you have to do is invite David Dorfman to come and join you for a week and you'll have a riot. I will say that. I mean, it's all of the things that everyone mentioned. It's, I think we're all so fortunate to live in the world that we do live in with clean water and all kinds of things there, you know, and we can still like cook and I mean, I've actually cooked this year and I never cooked before. And so there, you know, there's certain aspects of life that we will hold on to as we move forward out of this pandemic. But I think that for me, I've spent more time outside than I ever have. And I live in an incredibly beautiful place, you know, and so outside time, cooking time, and art making time. But I also have to say that even though there's been more time for that, the other piece of it is that we're still working as hard, if not even harder, because there was a lot of reinvention that had to happen. And so I think the time that's been replaced with those other things outside cooking is the social time that we used to have together. And, you know, I miss people for sure. Yeah.
I'm really excited about hugs. I'm gonna hug everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes me, that makes me think about, well, my show that I've been binging is called The Bureau. It's a French spy show, which I highly recommend. And that's been my fun personally. And it does make me think what you all are sharing is what are the things that we have have reinvented in this moment, and how are we going to take those forward? So it may be virtual events alongside in-person things, or it may not be in other cases. Do you have things in your organization that you are seeing, okay, this is something that we learned this year in our reinvention, and we're going to be translating that into the next iteration of who we become?
Yeah, for us, definitely. I think having because I was never a huge component of virtual activations. I just don't think everything works virtually. And it's super hard to ask someone to go to your website and stay there all day, right? It's hard because you're competing with social media and all that stuff and just life. But for us, the virtual festivals for Denver and the Vineyard have been, the audience reach has been phenomenal. To be exact, we reached 2.5 million viewers. No movie theater or performing arts center would ever have those kind of numbers. So we would be foolish not to incorporate virtual activations with what we're doing moving forward. So yeah, for us, it was a good learning to realize that, hey, this does work. And for people who can't get to Denver, or for people who can't get to the Vineyard, we're going to offer films and discussions and so on and so forth prior to the festival and after the festival to just expand our reach. I mean, we reach people, in Kenya and in Ghana and in Rome and in Finland. And it was crazy. And that wouldn't happen if we were just in, Denver, Colorado, or on Martha's Vineyard. So I think for us, virtual is definitely always going to be a part of our docket.
I would say,
All right, Babs, you go first.
Okay, I was just going to say that it definitely coming away with the world is our community. That availability is amazing. And I also think that there are a lot of people who have been taking classes, like even dance classes virtually, who prefer that. They prefer that privacy almost. And they will continue with that. And it's the same thing that Stephanie's saying. You can have a person in Amsterdam taking a dance class, or in New York, or you can take a dance class with those people. So it's really expanded that aspect of it. For instance, I got tired of watching Netflix and one murder mystery after another. And so I tuned into Utah Presents and started going to performances. So, I mean, it just depends. It's like you, as a person, there's just maybe more options.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, Stephanie, you mentioned that you're not a nonprofit, so your funding sources are different, but you do pull on sponsors, and the reach for that virtual it's impressive for a sponsor. It's going to attract new sponsors, especially for us. It's going to bring, you know, more funds in when I can say, you know, our reach is over 100,000 people for this specific project. It's more likely that they're going to help fund our project.
Aisha, did you want to close us out? And it's okay if not.
No, I mean, you know, I'm just listening a lot. I mean, I think it's been so interesting. Like Vanessa, I started, you know, this position in the last year. I started in August. So much of this year has sort of felt like year zero, right? Like I'm just sort of fact gathering and on the fact finding mission, so that next year I can, you know, come August, I can really start to do the things that I want to do. And so it's weird to have only known this institution in the context of the pandemic, and to think through, you know, what we might be returning to, because I wasn't part of what it was before. So to some extent, that feels kind of liberating. I don't know what we should go back to, and maybe it doesn't matter.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's actually, I think that's a really beautiful thought for us to end on. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you all so much for your time and sharing. Thank you to Darby for all her hard work on convening us and coordinating us, and hand the baton over to Brooke.
Oh, that was so great to listen to. And we're grateful to all of you for participating. And I'm grateful to everyone who watches this. And Liz, thank you for moderating. Again, I just want to remind everybody that these panelists all work for amazing organizations. And so just as Bab said that she started coming to Utah Presents virtual events, I hope that everyone watching this starts to attend the film festival and looks at what you know, is going on in Ogden at the Contemporary Arts Center, and checks out what is happening with Aisha in Denver at the University of Denver, and you know, takes advantage of the fact that what's so great about this series is we get to meet actual people and actual creatives and artists doing projects. And if you haven't had a chance to watch the previous sessions where we talked to artists of all sorts of disciplines, I encourage you to go back and check out those recordings so you can discover their work and see what they're doing. So again, thanks to everyone for joining today. Thanks for our partners for supporting the work. And that's the end for today. Take care, everybody.